mentally mentally ill, but she's a liar. I'm not internationally.
Welcome, classic rock fans, to another episode of Classic Song Review, where classic tracks are excavated and explored. For today's episode, I'd like to talk about the Beatles' Penny Lane. For me, what is so remarkable about those Sgt. Pepper sessions, it was very much about inventing and reinventing musical form. The way those songs were so meticulously structured, layer by layer, which of course is the norm by today's standards, but then of course it was something very unusual. Also, Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields, which were very much part of the Sgt. Pepper sessions, establishes that theme of childhood. It's kind of a kaleidoscopic retrospection, if you like, which very much defines the album, I think. Geographically, of course, Penny Lane is a bus terminus, really, or leads to a bus terminus in Liverpool. McCartney himself said that Penny Lane was kind of nostalgic, but it really was a place that John and I knew. It was actually a bus terminus. I'd get the bus to his house and would have to change at Penny Lane. Of course, in 1966, the Beatles' last gig was Candlestick Park in San Francisco. But they decided that after that they weren't going to tour anymore. They were going to effectively become a studio band and produce material that they didn't have to worry about reproducing live. Of course, the decision not to tour anymore very much left Brian Epstein feeling redundant, which kind of sort of paved the way towards his end, I think. Nevertheless, the Beatles at this time were thinking about interesting ideas and concepts for their next album. We kind of see the direction the band are going in with, of course, songs like Eleanor Rigby and Tomorrow Never Knows on the Revolver album. But they wanted to, one of the ideas was they were going to do a collection of songs about Liverpool, and of course Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane kind of fall into that vein in many respects. I think what put them off the idea was that Lionel Bart was doing his musical, or had released his musical, somebody called Maggie May, which was set on Merseyside. That was in 1966, I think. Nevertheless, I think Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields does set a precedent. The poet, Roger McGough, says, apart from those sort of American songs like Route 66, this was the first time such English places were celebrated in popular music. An interesting aside, of course, you may or may not know, is, of course, Penny Lane was the actual road itself was actually possibly named after James Penny, who was actually an 18th century slave trader. McCartney has gone on record as saying that one of the influences for the song was the Animals song Club A Go-Go, released in 1965, which is actually about a club in Newcastle. But what is being established here is that kind of geographical sentiment, retrospection, if you like, that's firmly rooted in place and time. And certainly McCartney captures captures a nostalgic flavour on Penny Lane. But if we think about the seeds of the song Penny Lane, there's actually a reference. There was going to be a reference to Penny Lane when John Lennon was writing the song In My Life, but eventually he changed his mind. But there were a few threads at this time that are coming together that would culminate or certainly influence the Pepper sessions. Certainly was a kind of a newfound freedom in the studio, but there was also other certain influences that really kind of made them want to up their game, I think. In fact, Jeff Emerick in his book Here, There and Everywhere explains that Pet Sounds, the influence of Pet Sounds was a real sort of motivator for McCartney to try and push for a very clean and precise sort of American sound, one where there was no bleed through on the recordings. For Penny Lane, production begins on the 29th of December 1966. Studio 2, I think, is at Abbey Road. The piano, of course, is the main instrument. On Penny Lane, in fact, there are 4 pianos that are used. They're all playing 4 beats to the bar. In musical terms, playing 4 beats to the bar is very much like replacing jogging with walking. I think for McCartney, this could very much be kind of a musical motif, or musical metaphor, I should say, because it kind of represents a nostalgic stroll for all the places that sort of populate his childhood. For the chorus of Penny Lane, McCartney plays an instrument called a harmonium, an instrument really associated with churches. But what this instrument does is it adds a kind of sustained, deep, and sort of breathy quality to the chorus. It also adds instrumental colour, which is very much a feature of this song, especially when you add the piccolo trumpet as well. The idea to use the piccolo trumpet came to McCartney after he watched a performance of Bach's Brandenburg Concerto 2. I think it was on the television he was watching it. But the piccolo trumpet is a very unique and interesting instrument that was very much out of vogue, really. So it's unusual that it's used on a pop record. Some have said that this is the very first time it's ever been used on a pop record. The guy that plays the instrument is Dave Mason, not to be confused with the Dave Mason of Traffic, a different guy altogether. Of course, what this instrument does is it provides very clear and clean sound, effectively penetrating the sort of thicker, sort of mid-range textures of the song. For me, the decision to use this instrument very much epitomises the brilliance of the Sgt. Pepper sessions. It's sort of baroque colouring superimposed upon a very contemporary sounding 4 beats to the bar. What they've done effectively is they've created a new hybrid sound. Anyway, the song was released as a single, as a double A-side with Strawberry Fields on 13th of February 1967 in the UK. It was actually one of I think the first record singles to have a picture sleeve, which was quite rare at the time in the UK. It got to number 2. It was just stopped from getting to the number 1 spot by Engelbert's Humperdinck's Please Release Me. Most of us like to think that the sort of Penny Lane promotional film was recorded in Liverpool. In fact, it wasn't. It was actually recorded in London. The Beatles didn't particularly want to travel back to Liverpool, so they recorded it in London, and partly in Sevenoaks, Kent as well, where the Strawberry Fields promotional film was recorded. If we think about this song lyrically, it's not just about geography. The same, of course, could be said for Strawberry Fields. It's about a state of mind. Let's not forget McCartney was experimenting with LSD around about 1966, and all the hallmarks of that are very much apparent in this song, where he talks about the place being in his head, in my eyes and in my ears. There's no doubt in my mind that this is kind of a lysergic influenced amble down memory lane. But the song is also, the way it's structured, it's almost like a child flicking through a picture book in many ways. It's got that feel to it. The banker with his motor car, the fireman with his clean fire engine, and the nurse with her poppies. And this kind of makes it links very nicely with the sort of textures explored on the Sgt. Pepper album. Interestingly, if I may refer to my notes, Stan Williams writes that he was actually a school friend of John Lennon's, said that the pretty nurse in the song is actually a Beth Williams, who was a cadet nurse that used to sell poppies. The reference in the song to she feels as if she's in a play, she is anyway, has kind of a twofold meaning for me. It can mean one of two things. Firstly, of course, the aforementioned Beth Williams used to like to put on shows, was very theatrical and liked to perform in front of an audience, meaning number one. Number two, of course, is possibly a reference to Timothy Leary, who said the ego was a sham and all that we think of as reality is merely an illusion. Lyrically, of course, what's so interesting about this song is not only the very sort of surreal textures, but it's also the ambiguities. For example, the narrative, it seems to be happening on a fine summer's day beneath the deep blue suburban skies, yet at the same time it's raining. The fireman, of course, rushes in from the pouring rain, yet at the same time it's winter, because the poppy seller selling poppies, Remembrance Day, which is November. I've got a great quote by a chap called Ian MacDonald. He says, seemingly naturalistic, the lyric scene is actually kaleidoscopic. As well as raining and shining at the same time, it's simultaneously summer. What I like is the kind of constant sort of pointing to things. It's like McCartney's trying to reveal to us what's unfolding in his head. It's a scene that's crowded with reminiscences, a kind of imaginative bustle, if you like. But also I think what gives this song a very British feel to it is the slang expression for a fish and finger pies, of course, which was British slang for four pennies worth of fish and chips at the time. Finger pie was a sort of smutty sexual allusion, which I think McCartney just threw in just for the hell of it. But nevertheless, it makes it lyrically, musically, quite an eclectic and rather interesting track. Anyway, you've been watching an episode of Classic Song Review. Please click like and subscribe. Check out the Facebook page by all means. But more importantly, please do keep listening.